saying what in a literature review? When you go to write a lit review, you got to make sure that you distinguish what you say from what other people or other scholars have said. As you're moving into writing your lit review and submitting your first draft, this chapter 5 on They Say I Say by Graffin Birkenstein is going to help you be able to specify who's saying what. In this chapter, Graffin Birkenstein introduces us to something called voice markers and signal verbs. These two concepts are some of the things that I'd like for you to incorporate in your lit review. In these templates that are provided for you on page 72 to 73 and page 75, you'll be able to indicate whose voice you, the writer, are speaking in when you summarize something and then when you opine on that summary. And also who's saying what on every point that you're making in your paper. It's really important that in your lit review, working from your annotated bibliography and your additional research, that you make a point about why you are bringing a certain citation article into your paper. It's almost like a good movie. A good movie only introduces characters or plot lines that contribute to the greater advancement of that movie, right? And think of your lit review in this way. The articles that you use should be contributing to your overall argument. And you got the onus is on you. You've got to be able to make a clear point of who's making that argument and why you're using it. In this chapter, Graffin Birkenstein provide a example of one piece by George Mantsios, and he writes this set of paragraphs in an article he calls Rewards and Opportunities, the Politics and Economics of Class in the United States. In the passage, he writes, quote, "We are all middle class," unquote, or so it would seem. Our national consciousness, as shaped in large part by the media and our political leadership, provides us with a picture of ourselves as a nation of prosperity and opportunity with an ever-expanding middle-class lifestyle. As a result, our class differences are muted and our collective character is homogenized. Yet, class divisions are real and arguably the most significant factor to determining both our very being in the world and the nature of the society we live in. If you look at that passage in the book, I'd like for you to underline the things that you think are voice markers. I'm going to give you 10 seconds of this lecture to do that. Cool. So now we're back. You could have just forwarded 10 seconds or actually did the exercise. It's cool, whatever is cool with you. Here, I'm showing you the slide that sort of shows you the voice markers. It's, or so it would seem, is one way of satirically marking that other people are noting that everyone thinks that the United States is all middle class. And the folks that George Mantsios is saying that, is all like sort of creating this image of middle classness is the media and the political leadership of our country. And then he goes on to say that there are impacts to that, right? And he uses this voice marker called as a result, right? Sort of points us to the consequence of this ideology. And then he uses yet. And yet is one of my favorite words because it is such a clear pivot, helps the reader see the pivot between what a writer is doing and where they are headed. Oftentimes, yet sets you up to make an I statement. And I know many of you have been taught not to use an I statement, and sometimes you have been taught not to use the I statement because it calls in your own subjective perspective way too much, and that perhaps paper writing should be more objective. Well, in this course and in your sociology upper division courses, we want you to use your I statements. We want you to own your voice. We want you to own your analysis, and we want you to own your opinion. And so when you say a voice marker like yet or as a consequence, it helps to set you up as a person that is producing knowledge, a person that is producing some type of analysis and opinion. So we are going to, in this course, use I statements. I mean, not irresponsibly, but we'd like for you to be able to say, this is what they are saying, and this is now what I am saying. In this chapter, in this lecture, and heading into your lit review, it's super important that you figure out the voice markers that fit well with your writing, because as Graff and Birkenstein say, readers who fail to notice the voice markers often take an author's summaries of what someone else believes to be an expression of what that author believes themselves. And I think in summarizing, paraphrasing, quoting other people's work, it's really important that you signal to your peers and to myself what is it that other scholars are bringing to the table and what is it that you are bringing to the table. The last consequence of not distinguishing what they say to what you say is that you might sometimes get confused as to what your idea is and how it relates to another person's writing. And Graff and Birkenstein write so clearly on page 75, when writers fail to use voice markers, their summaries of others' views tend to become confused with their own ideas and vice versa. A literature review is a tough challenge, and it is a writing skill that you will hone in your future upper division classes. So be careful and make sure that you are distinguishing what they say versus what you say. Until next time.